Hello and welcome to another edition of Fight News Now. I'm your host, John Pollock, and today we've got a packed show lined up for you as we take a look at UFC Fight Night, Nogueira versus Nelson from Abu Dhabi. As well, we're going to take a look ahead to the Ultimate Fighter Nations Finale. Later on in the program, John Ramdeen and Robin Black, they are going to stop by for 3 rounds. The Shift looks at the EA Sports UFC game as well as the Raid 2. But up first are this week's newsmakers, and that's where we begin. It's a heavyweight clash set to go down this weekend in Abu Dhabi as Pride veteran and MMA legend Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira steps into the octagon to take on Big Country Roy Nelson. Though both men are coming off of losses, it remains an intriguing fight as both men possess Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts and are more than willing to slug it out. We now take a closer look at the main event of UFC Fight Night, Nogueira versus Nelson.
Since the genesis of the Abu Dhabi Combat Club and its Submission Wrestling World Championship, the capital of the United Arab Emirates has seen its fair share of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts, but rarely do they get to watch them punch each other in the face. For most of his career, Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira has been known as the best heavyweight Jiu-Jitsu player in mixed martial arts, however suffering submission losses to both Frank Mir and Fabrizio Verdun shows that era has ended. On the feet, Big Nog has solid boxing skills, which could be the key to success in the desert. Standing opposite the legendary heavyweight will be Roy Big Country Nelson. While the Las Vegas native also boasts a BJJ black belt, he hasn't scored a submission win since 2006.
Like, I used to submit everybody, like when I first started, but then when I got my first knockout, I was like, man, this is so much easier than this wrestling and jiu-jitsu stuff.
In addition to Big Country's devastating power, he also has one of the strongest chins in the sport, having never been finished in the UFC. While this fight may not feature the very top of the heavyweight division, it does boast 2 old-school guys who are promising fireworks.
You know, he's going to basically try to choke me out or knock me out, and at the end of the day, I'm going to try to do the same thing.
Competing only one time in 2012 and again in 2013, Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira has had only 2 fights in the UFC over the past 2 years, with only 2 wins in his last 5 fights. Big Nog heads into this weekend's bout as the underdog against Roy Nelson.
Minotauro and Big Country is going to be an interesting fight for the heavyweight division.
2 fighters like old school, you know, we come out for bang, you know, we come out for fight.
It's a bad stylistic matchup for him. I think he's going to have a hard time getting Roy Nelson down, especially with the height difference.
Everything can happen, you know. I like to strike as well. He got a really good power in his right hand, but I like, you know, to trade punches and, you know, the spot.
Roy Nelson hits like a truck, and Roy Nelson's no schlep on the mat, so it's not like if he does get him down, he's in that much trouble. So I think Roy Nelson's going to take this one out with a big KO.
I'm going to have to go with the Brazilian, you know, with the age and experience. I think that he wins this fight.
We're going to do a war over there, you know, 2 lions in the cage. You know, I just promise you guys going to see a really good fight.
And speaking of UFC heavyweights, this week's tweet of the week comes to us courtesy of Alistair Overeem, who was doing some fine dining the other night. Doesn't that look enticing? The war of words will come to an end for 2 middleweights on April 16th as Michael Bisping takes on Tim Kennedy in the main event of the TUF Nations Finale in Quebec City. Bisping makes his return to the octagon following a year-long layoff due to an eye injury. Now it's time to dig a little deeper as we give you details about this 185-pound affair.
In the lead-up to the TUF Nations main event between Michael Bisping and Tim Kennedy, let's just say things have gotten a bit heated.
I've been wanting to fight some of the better guys. I would settle for Michael Bisping.
I'm fighting Tim Kennedy. It's time to shut him up once and for all. He's been giving it this on Twitter for about 4 years, it feels like.
I think he's easy to make fun of. He's a jerk.
He's made a mistake. He's talked his way into a high-profile fight, and he's going to get beat up on a high-profile stage.
Much of the rivalry centers around Bisping's fight with Jorge Rivera and the Brits' actions afterwards, which were highlighted in a video produced by Kennedy and Rivera sponsor Ranger Up.
Yeah, I have something against him. He's a dirty fighter. He eye pokes, he kicks down knees down opponents, he spits on their corners.
Kennedy is 2-0 since joining the UFC and scored a knockout win over Rafael Natal in his last outing.
This is what we do. We finish fights.
That bout only came about because Machida was tapped to face Munoz when Bisping pulled out with a detached retina. In fact, the Count hasn't fought since April of last year.
100% no more hoops to jump through. I'm back 100%.
In the cage, this one seems like a classic striker versus grappler battle.
Against Tim Kennedy, the game plan's pretty simple. Try and keep it on the feet. He's a wrestler, so keep it on the feet, beat him up there, punch him, kick him.
I called the UFC and I was like, I want to fight Bisping. I want to monkey stomp him. I don't care where I do it. As long as he fights a clean fight, he has no chance.
And a Brit triumph in Quebec City once again, or will Kennedy dethrone the Count?
Bisping and Kennedy will take center stage next Wednesday evening in Quebec City, but the co-main event of the Ultimate Fighter Nations Finale features a welterweight clash between the season's coaches as Team Canada's head coach Patrick Cote squares off against Australian captain Kyle Noke. We take a look now from our panel of pros who give us their predictions for the TUF Nations Finale.
I see Bisping winning this fight. I see the problems that he provided for Chael. I think Tim Kennedy's a similar fighter to Chael as far as he wants the wrestling takedown. And Chael's, I think, a slightly better wrestler and was having nightmares taking Bisping down. Bisping might not be a big puncher all the time, but he's an accurate puncher. He's got great cardio and a great game plan, so I see him causing problems for Kennedy here.
Patrick Cote is going to put a hole in his head. I don't know when or where or how. Actually, I know all of those answers. It's going to be huge. I'm honestly so excited for Patrick because at 170, he's the place where he needs to be, and it revitalized a career that's an amazing and ongoing career. So I'm so excited for him to put a hole and put someone to sleep.
Women's MMA veteran and TUF 18 alumni Shayna Baszler was expected to take on Canadian Sarah Kaufman at the Ultimate Fighter Nations Finale until she pulled out of the fight due to injury. Baszler was recently a guest on the MMA Report where she discussed her time on TUF and the importance of standing out in the UFC.
I worked with Josh Barnett for a million years, and he has always told me that showing your personality, you know, it's a given to fans because I get in the cage that I train and I do pad work, and I hit the heavy bag, and I do grappling. So fans are really interested in the other side of you. I think it was good that I did the show because I was able to show some personality. I think it got translated a bit wrong in some instances, especially on my episode. But you know, a lot of fans came around as the show went on. They started seeing the different sides of me. There's only a handful of people in the world that can say that they are at the very pinnacle of whatever it is they do. If you do MMA, male or female, you want to be in the UFC, and I'm there.
Josh Koscheck was a cast member of the very first season of The Ultimate Fighter, and he has gone on to make a major name for himself in the promotion. After 19 seasons of The Ultimate Fighter in the books, Koscheck gives us his take on the level of star power the UFC has produced.
I think it's become more commercial, that's for sure. You know, as before, I believe that, you know, back in the day when you had like the, you know, the Chuck Liddells, the Randy Couture's, the, you know, the old school guys, it was more exciting, I think. You know, they had big stars. You walk down the street and I guarantee you right now, you put whoever, one of the 5 champions that are in the UFC now, and you put Chuck Liddell on the other side of the street, and I can guarantee you that on the other side of the street where Chuck Liddell is, there's going to be a lot of people. I mean, it's crazy. The star power that they had back in the day seemed to be so big and so good, and, you know, got people excited about the fights. Whereas now, I think that, you know, there's just too many shows and not enough stars to fill those shows. And I think that we need to do a better job in our sport creating more stars so that, you know, people get excited about the sport, you know, and it's just not, oh, there's another fight, or who's fighting this weekend. You know, it boils down to creating more stars in our sport, you know, bigger stars, not just more stars, bigger stars, like the Chuck Liddells, the Randy Couture's, the Quentin Jacksons, even Tito Ortiz is a big star.
Since becoming the UFC lightweight champion, Anthony Pettis has had a massive target on his back with a number of fighters calling him out. While he is scheduled to fight Gilbert Melendez next, Melendez's teammate Nate Diaz has verbally attacked the champion, and here's how Pettis has responded.
Nate Diaz, me and him had some history. He's talked a lot in the media. He's mentioned my name a lot. He's not too far off from a title shot. A couple more wins, you know, Nate Diaz might be another guy that could be challenging me for my belt. But he made it personal. I mean, he's talking a lot. And that's something that I don't like. I mean, if he makes it personal, then for me it's a personal fight. And I think the fans want to see that fight as well. I mean, he talks a lot. He has a lot of fans in the U.S., Brazil, everywhere. So I think that'll be a good fight. You know, after Melendez, that's his teammate. They say they're #1 and #2 in the world. So I guess we'll find out soon.
And I am joined here by John Ramdine, as we heard there from lightweight champion Anthony Pettis. No shortage of people that want a chance at the champion, including Nate Diaz. Logic be damned.
Nate Diaz, this guy's always creating interest. We love this fighter, but him and Nick, these guys are tremendous.
They would have fit in very well maybe on a 1980s Nordiques game at the Pepsi Colisée, which is going to have plenty of violence next Wednesday that I understand you and Robin are going to be chatting about.
That's right. It is all about Quebec City. We're going to tell you which fighters are going to look good and which fight will be fight of the night.
So if you can't watch the show next Wednesday, just watch 3 rounds because they are going to play Nostradamus for you when we come back on Fight News Now. Welcome back to Fight News Now. John Pollock here with you, and at this time we welcome in John Ramdine and Robin Black for another installment of 3 rounds. And guys, before we get into the fights, let's address the elephant in the room. A lot of our viewers, they had really become attached to the John Ramdine iPad. I noticed a laptop. What happened, John?
I'm an idiot. I left it on the commuter train, and that's the way it goes.
So maybe if one of our viewers found a random iPad, they could send it to the Fight Network studios, downtown Toronto, care of John Ramdine. Poor John Ramdine. Yeah. The tears this man had coming down his cheeks.
What are you going to do? That's a part of life. We got to talk about all the stuff that's going down in Quebec City. The UFC invades the Pepsi Coliseum in the main event. A fantastic middleweight encounter. One of the greatest fighters, I think, in the Ultimate Fighting Championship right now. Michael Bisping. This guy creates so much interest. This guy is always game. He performs at the highest level, but he's going to be taking on a guy that is nearly unbreakable in Tim Kennedy. The problem is, not a lot of people like Tim Kennedy. Why is that?
Okay, first of all, I know you enjoyed trolling people, but if you are going to say to the world that Michael Bisping is one of the greatest fighters ever, you is going to get lots of hate.
I really don't care.
These Americans, they seem to like Tim Kennedy, and I think the guy's a fantastic fighter. He showed phenomenal grappling and control against Gracie, and then against tennis great Rafael Nadal, he showed great striking. That really is the sum of this guy's game. But the thing is, you got to understand, this guy is a bully. He's picking on Michael Bisping. You can't just bully somebody and treat them like crap because you say they're a bad guy. He's a bully. Why do people dislike Michael Bisping? They seem to claim that he's chinny. The guy's been knocked out 2 times. Dan Henderson with an H-bomb and Vitor Belfort with a giant left head kick.
Both on TRT, might I add.
They also say that the guy has pillow fists. He's knocked out 14 dudes in his life. This is his 20th UFC fight, and he's 14-5. His 5 losses against 5 of the greatest. So Michael Bisping is a great fighter. I don't care why you don't like him. And Tim Kennedy is a phenomenal fighter, but he's a bully.
Michael Bisping hasn't seen action in a year. Is that going to play a factor? Or, however, I mean, when you think about that, yes, ring rust is going to be an issue, but Michael Bisping is one of these consummate professionals, always trying to improve, and he would not step inside of the cage unless he was ready to go.
I agree 100%, but eye injuries are a weird one. We saw Alan Belcher come back from an eye injury against Bisping, I seem to recall, and it can make a guy tentative. The thing about Bisping, he is a little crazy, and I don't think it's going to make him tentative. I don't think the ring rust will affect him, and I don't think the bullying is going to affect him either, because everybody bullies this guy. Everybody tries to get under his skin. Everybody insults him and makes fun of him. So I don't think that's going to help him. I think that's a bit of a waste of time by Kennedy. I am not anti-Kennedy. I think Tim Kennedy is a phenomenal striker, a phenomenal wrestler. I love watching this guy fight. I just don't care for the other nonsense he pulls.
When I look at this main event, it has fight of the night written all over it. Both guys know how to push the pace. Both guys are very good in every single area. They can take punches, and most importantly, they always look for the finish. Both guys are always moving forward. I love this matchup. However, the only fight I think on the card that could probably give it a run for its money in terms of fight of the night has to be the lightweight matchup between our boy Sam Stout and KJ Noons. These guys are probably not going down to the ground. They're going to keep it standing over the course of 15 minutes. They are going to try to smash each other in the stand-up realm.
Yeah, I mean, Sam could look for a couple of takedowns.
Maybe.
We've seen that at certain times in his career when the opportunity arises to try to mix it up a little bit. But KJ Noons is a great
takedown
boxer,
defense.
great kickboxer with great takedown defense. We know what's going to happen. It happens every time Sam fights. He's been alternating between wins and losses, but he has not been alternating between exciting fights and anything else.
When you look at this card, I heard a lot of complaints going into it. Oh, you know, Bisping and Tim Kennedy, just not a great main event.
Great main event.
Why should I go to this event? Well, you got Bisping Kennedy. You have, of course, as I mentioned before, Sam Stout, KJ Noons. Also on the card, Dustin Poirier taking on Akira Corassani. Aubin Mercier taking on Chad Laprise for the Ultimate Fighter Nations. Kyle Noke and Patrick Cote. A fantastic card from top to bottom. But I think if somebody's going to get knockout of the night or submission of the night, it's probably going to be Dustin Poirier. This guy, one of the guys that's flying under the radar at 145 pounds.
Yeah, not for long, and he knows or believes he's on another level. Akira, he's good, he's talented. The thing that makes this fight exist is his willingness to fight. That's why he's in this fight. That'll serve him well, but you can't break Poirier. You can't get him to take a step back. You can't affect him mentally, and he's really, really, really good at everything. So if there's money to be bet, it is on Dustin Poirier.
And Robin, on an interesting side note, Sarah Kaufman was supposed to take on submission fighter Shayna Baszler. Baszler was out. Then the striker Amanda Nunes was in. She hurt her hand. She's out. In steps Leslie Smith, making her UFC debut. And people are like, oh, this girl's going to get taken down and destroyed by the former Strikeforce champion. However, these two actually faced off against each other in Invicta. Sarah Kaufman walked away with the split decision victory. So a great storyline for this women's bantamweight matchup.
Yeah, Kaufman and Smith. This almost ends up being the fight that Kaufman really wanted. She wants that one back. There's people who think that Smith won that fight, including Smith. She wants the rematch too. It's a really nice matchup. But Kaufman's got a big advantage of having been in training camp for 8 weeks, already preparing. Smith, really a lot of balls on this woman to step in here at the last second and face such a good fighter.
Also, Mitch Gagnon on the card. We know he was a submission fighter, constantly improving his game. Joseph Valtellini, glory fighter, one of his striking coaches, saying he is coming along nicely.
Yeah, Bazooka Joe, man, has tightened his striking right up. We saw it in his last performance. His physicality looks good. His counter-striking looks good. Mitch Gagnon is somebody to watch at 135.
Mr. Pollock, my pick for knockout of the night, however, will be Patrick Cote over Kyle Noke. He is going to get the knockout.
Oh, wow. You've been saving that one. Well, we'll have lots of coverage next week. Robin Black and I will both be in Quebec City, so keep it tuned here on Fight Network for lots of coverage of the TUF Nations Finale. We're going to take a short break, but coming up, we have more with the shift coming up and, of course, this week's viral video. So don't go anywhere. We're coming back on Fight News Now.
This is the moment UFC fans around the world have been waiting for.
Welcome back to Fight News Now. John Pollock here with you, and I want to let you know that we have some live kickboxing action with Glory 15 on tap this Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, and following that, we've got a dose of Cage Warriors 67 from Swansea, Wales at 9 p.m. But now it's time to head on over to the shift with Priscilla Carapan, who has some details on EA Sports UFC.
Electronic Arts recently announced that EA Sports UFC will be launched on June 17th, and there's an extra bonus because you can fight in the octagon with the godfather of mixed martial arts, Bruce Lee. You can pre-order to get an instant one-day access or unlock him by defeating career mode at pro difficulty. Now, what's really cool is that you can play as Bruce Lee in 4 different weight categories, so imagine all the fantasy matchups you can put together. Bruce Lee versus GSP, that's pretty wicked. Back in 2011, director Gareth Evans blew audiences away with the Indonesian martial arts action film, The Raid Redemption. Well, Evans is back for the second installment of the series, which promises more high-impact, non-stop fight sequences.
Rama doesn't get much time to rest as The Raid 2 takes place 2 hours after The Raid Redemption. Rama infiltrates a ruthless crime syndicate to protect his family and uncover corruption in his police force. Holy sh**. I wouldn't want to clean up after this. Are you in trouble, man? Wait, what are you gonna do with those hammers? Yeah. All right, this one isn't even starting slow. I know something crazy's about to go down. If you're not impressed by the Raid 2 yet, you've lost your damn mind. Ah.
That's it for the shift this week. We'll see you next week. Back over to you, John.
Thank you, Priscilla, and we're almost out of time, but before we go, let's have a look at what our staff dug up for this week's viral video. Only the best, folks. That does it for another edition of Fight News Now. I want to thank Shayna Baszler for stopping by, as well as Sean Pearson, Elias Theodoro for their predictions on the upcoming fights, and everyone else for tuning in. Be sure to catch Glory 15 this Saturday at 2:30, and as always, you can catch me on the MMA Report Thursdays on FightNetwork.com. On behalf of John Randine, Robin Black, Priscilla Carapan, and the whole Fight Network crew, I'm John Pollock, and we'll see you here next week on Fight News Now.
Live